Now that you've begun to gain a better understanding of the story by listening to radios and have played a good amount of the map selection, now what I would recommend you do is to pick a character. Any character. It does not matter if it's your favorite or if it's the most popular character from the mode. It can be, but it doesn't have to be though. Just pick a character and learn that character to absolute completion. By now, you probably have a general understanding of a lot of the different characters and people in the story. But this is where you'll really need to buckle down and try to learn their personality, their goals, and what drives them, as well as understanding their whole story arc, or as much as their arc as you currently can, if the story is still ongoing, of course. For this video series, I'm speaking mostly in the frame of the OD for storyline, but some of you may be trying to apply this to the current Darky for storyline, which is still ongoing. It's not complete yet, and that's perfectly fine. In fact, I highly encourage you to do that. I think it's great to have people engaging with the new iterations of the Treyarch Zombie storyline. But not to get too off topic, one way you could go about doing this for the OD for storyline specifically is to take the timeline image that Treyarch released back in 2017 during the release of Zombie Chronicles and follow the character paths. Follow the perspective of the characters on that timeline. Or, if you find that image too difficult to follow and read properly, which I do not blame you in the slightest for, that image, despite being one of the only official resources that we have ever gotten, is quite a mess to interpret. So, what you could do instead is use our Google Doc, which covers the entire classic E4 storyline. This document includes every entry from the official timeline that they released, as well as other entries added to fill out new information that we learned in Black Ops 4 Zombies. Because, keep in mind, that image Treyarch put out was released at the end of the Black Ops 3 lifecycle. I promise you that by sitting down and taking the time necessary to learn a character to completion, you will have learned something new. Even if you're someone who knows quite a lot about the story and the happenings in it, if you really take the time to fully learn a character that you previously were kinda shaky on, you will have learned something new, whether it's about an event they set in motion in the story, or something that happens to this character. You will learn how they were affected by it on an emotional level, and you will learn how the events that shape them influence the entire arc that they go through and the impact it leaves on the wider narrative. Another thing that really helped me whenever I was first trying to get into the zombie storyline was to stop viewing it on a game-by-game basis, and instead to view it as one continuous overarching narrative. This is a bit easier to do now that every entry of the classic E4 storyline is out there and it's a complete work of fiction. But that wasn't always the case, and for fans of the Darky for storyline, that's definitely not the case now either. During the life cycle of Vanguard Zombies, and even now, there is a lot of resentment for its story, and rightfully so. Even I didn't find the main plot to be very captivating or really well written at all, and that's a shame. But one argument I would see time and time again is something along the lines of, this has nothing to do with Cold War. And my usual rebuttal to this would normally be, well, it's a prequel. What did you expect? And while non-linearity isn't everyone's cup of tea, I think you might be able to get a bit more enjoyment out of the experience by viewing it through the lens of the entire journey at large. And that's to really ask the question, while going into this new chapter, what ideas and themes should I have on my mind from where we just were? Just because in this case, the game itself is set 40 years earlier and features 0 returning characters from the previous entry, isn't to say that it's wholly disconnected and thus should be viewed with a totally different lens. One example I want to give here is something we were introduced to at the very tail end of Cold War Zombies, in the Season 6 Requiem document entitled Memorandum for the Board. We learned that the director of Requiem, Eddie, isn't just working for the CIA, but that he sits on a board of directors within a company that we, up to that point, knew nothing about. And that's where they left us hanging. And then Vanguard came about a month later, and not long after launch we began to hear whispers about a shadowy secret organization known as the Society Occult, a group that has been around for centuries and has sought to exploit the Dark Ether to gain wealth and power in our own reality. A lot of people didn't seem to really pick up on this because they simply didn't want to play the game. But those who had been paying close attention to the story as a whole at that point were quick to put the pieces together that this, in all likelihood, was the very same group of people Eddie works for in the 1980s. And while the jury is still out on that one, in that we don't technically have official confirmation on whether or not this is actually the case, it just goes to show that despite these two stories having very little to do with one another tonally and plot-wise, there's still a lot of ways in which one can influence the other in order to build up the important events further down the road. So in that sense, it's very important to try to see the bigger picture that's unfolding.